This is Dr. Tiwari.
And this is Dr. Kocak.
And you're listening to the
Best Podcast Ever.
Broadcasting from Columbus, Ohio, we'll be talking about plastic surgery procedures focusing on only the breast.
Ranging from breast reconstruction to breast enhancement and reduction, we'll cover everything you ever wanted to know about the breast. Welcome back to the Best Podcast Ever. This is Dr. Kocak.
Hey everybody, Dr. Tiwari here. We are really excited today to have April Stearns from Wildfire Magazine joining us on the podcast. April, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, guys. Happy to be here. I'm April Stearns. I am the founder and editor of Wildfire Magazine, and I had breast cancer when I was 35 years old.
Tell us, maybe start off with what is Wildfire? What is kind of your mission? And what kind of got you to start your own magazine?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely not something that I dreamed of, as a little girl, making my own magazine. It grew out of just a real need for a resource I wasn't finding around the time of my diagnosis, which was to find other younger people who were being diagnosed. At the time when I was diagnosed, there was no one else at my particular oncology office who was young that my doctor could point me to. And in my area, there weren't a lot of younger women being diagnosed or forming groups or connections. And it was also 2012. So there wasn't for me, a lot of Facebook and things like that helping me find other women. So for a few years, I felt pretty alone, but I was also just on that path of, chemo, radiation, surgery. I was just going through the motions and doing exactly what was laid out for me to do. So it wasn't until afterward that I really felt that need for community and that loss. And I looked around for a few years. I didn't find it. I really needed to see it and know how others were making a life after diagnosis and after treatment. And so I just decided, okay, I guess it's going to be me, and I guess we'll just jump in and do this. And so it started off as a blog with me just recruiting people who were sharing their stories and writing. And I just was finding them, scouring the internet and asking them, can I post your story here? Can I share your story? And then from there, it grew into an actual magazine. It's about 100 pages, comes out every other month on different themes related to survivorship. For example, right now I'm working on the body issue, which is all different types of breast surgery, obviously, but also, hair loss, weight gain, just body dysmorphia, like all that different stuff that comes along with a diagnosis and life afterwards.
What was your background, April? Is this something that you saw yourself doing? Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I do have a degree in journalism, and I did work at a newspaper way back, but I came out of college around the time of things really heating up in Silicon Valley, and I got pulled away from journalism and more into a path of helping startups as an editor and doing things like that, and then eventually got more into event planning. So I've always been doing writing, always been doing editing, but it kind of got into more marketing and that kind of writing. I would say when my daughter was born and then with my own breast cancer diagnosis, I went back into writing more personal narrative and starting a blog and doing it that way. But so I do have a background in journalism. I just didn't ever envision this having to start it myself part.
So with the background in journalism, so it makes sense then maybe your outlet around that time, especially, you've got I was just looking at your page here as we talked, 3-year-old daughter at the time. That could be very difficult. So that was probably the outlet, right? Be able to kind of journal and write what was going on.
Absolutely. I think, everyone needs to find a way to tell their story. And it, for me, made a lot of sense that it would be through words and writing because it came really natural for me.
We just talked to Patty Carey, who is a Young Survivor Coalition member in our area here in Columbus. And she said a lot of similar things, that there was nobody around her that was a young person. She had young children at the time of her diagnosis.
Yeah, she was like 40 when she got diagnosed, so it was very young as well. And so she was saying the exact same thing.
Yeah, a lot of kind of similar themes, I think, among, I'm sure, the Wildfire Magazine readers and the YSC members. Have you seen your magazine kind of resonate with people at all age groups?
That's a great question because I have, and I haven't limited my readership in any way. People do ask me that, I'm 50, I'm 60, can I read this magazine? And I feel that it's more if the themes resonate with a person, then they're in the right place, and they should read it. I do keep the contributors to a younger age because that's the core and that's where I started out. But I do hear that from different people that the themes are very universal across breast cancer, unless we're talking about having a very small child or having something that kind of pinpoints you into a particular time. But even then, people are having kids at all ages, it seems. And so it just kind of depends on what you're going through in your life. And then how breast cancer is kind of trying to be integrated into that life that you're living.
The one thing that came up in talking to Patty was this sort of balancing of career and family, which is always difficult, I think much more so for women than for men. And then on top of that, a breast cancer diagnosis. I've always been amazed by how patients do this. How do they navigate all this? What stories have come out of your readers and your writers?
Yeah. So those are big topics for women. And I think also combined with the fact that women feel, I think maybe a little more than men, that they're kind of the cornerstone of the family and they're kind of holding it all together. I know for me, when my diagnosis came, I felt a huge sense of guilt that I was the one who brought this destructive thing into our family. So we do have a lot of stories of women talking about how to juggle all of that, how to stay center to their family, but then allow their husband or their partner to take over more of those duties and roles that maybe they would traditionally have done and let someone else take care of them while they're going through, treatment. Let someone else take care of the kids or just trust that it's going to come together and it's going to be okay with the help of other family, community, whatever it has to be. Those are the stories I think, or an underlining theme there is this letting go of some of that control and also letting go of the guilt that it came. It's not anyone's fault that it came into the family. It just happened. And you have to just figure out how to move forward from there.
Yeah, I think family is such an important part of this because you've got to be able to communicate to your spouse, your partner, and your kids. And I would imagine a lot of your readers have young children or planning families. How do you tell your kids that you have this diagnosis and, mommy's going to be sick? How does that conversation go?
Yeah, that's a great question. Most people, and for myself included, found that the best way to do it was to be very open and honest with age-appropriate language, age-appropriate resources. So for me, my daughter, like you guys said, she was 3 when I was diagnosed. And at that point, I had a job that I was doing from home. My husband didn't, but we had worked out our life such that, I would work at home in the mornings. He would be with my daughter. Then we would flip. He would go to work and I would be with my daughter. So when my breast cancer diagnosis came and I was all of a sudden gone for lots of appointments or gone for treatment, that wasn't something she wasn't not going to notice, that I was missing. And I didn't want her not to know why, because I think that kids know when you're trying to gloss over things or lie to them or just put on a rosy smile. But I also didn't want to scare her. And so we just got some picture books that we found. There's lots and lots of resources for when grandma has breast cancer. There weren't as many for mom having cancer, but we found some. And it just helped us to share with her what was happening. I remember telling her that chemo was, the big medicine. I remember saying to her, I have to go for my big medicine today, and let her know that I was going to lose my hair. She actually helped me shave my head, which was really fun for her and took some of the fear, I think, out for her. We all bought pink wigs, which she also thought was really fun. So it was about finding the fun moments to take some of that fear out for her. But under all of that, I think the main thing was just honesty and openness and just letting her know we were going to get through it, but it was a big thing that was happening in our house.
How old is your daughter now?
She's 11 now.
So how has that changed the development of an 11-year-old who went through these really kind of complicated and scary things?
Does she remember it?
Yeah, she does. I mean, for her, breast cancer is still a big part of our life. She knows that I do Wildfire, and she's a huge fan for me, or of me and of my work. And so breast cancer has stayed a big part of our life all through these years. And I used to have a lot of worries about how it would affect her growing up, that we had gone through something so scary. I think it's maybe made her a more compassionate person. She understands that things are happening in families. You maybe don't realize, what someone else is going through or what other traumas are affecting people. So she's kind of developed this other sense of that awareness. But I think that it's an interesting thing that she's a girl and she is, headed into puberty now. And so I find us having a lot of body conversations that maybe the foundation was laid all those years ago when kind of the lid was just blown off the top and bodies became a huge topic in our house. But I think that it's, I don't know, she says that she wants to be a doctor and she wants to work in cancer when she grows up. So we'll see.
Tell her to do breast reconstruction.
Okay, I will.
That's how we both ended up here, pretty much. I'd say.
Yeah,
we both had mothers that went through it and impacted our trajectory significantly. So.
Oh, wow, that's great to hear.
I want to ask a question. It's pretty unusual for us to talk to a editor of a magazine.
Yeah.
So, tell us about the magazine industry. In the era of Facebook and Twitter and all this stuff, we tend to think less of print journalism and sort of social media, but social media has its own limitations.
Mm-hmm.
How has your industry, developed and responded to the things that we see in social media?
So I always have to come at it from the viewpoint of the breast cancer. And because I'm trying to tell stories and show images of bodies, it, for me, is always, I'm always seeing it through that guise of what Facebook and Instagram want to edit and want to ban, I guess, for lack of a better word. So for me, it makes a lot of sense to have a different medium than trying to have Facebook or Instagram or some other social media be the end all for those communications and those big conversations, because there's so little that you can really show. And what I like about having the magazine too is that there's so much information available by social media now and the internet that it can be overwhelming for someone, particularly.
Too much. Right. There's almost too much information. It's hard to know how to find information anymore.
Right. Or if it can be trusted, I think too. And so what I like about having the magazine is that someone, opts in for it, or a family member, subscribes them to it. And that right there, you're volunteering to receive the information, basically. So it's not just coming at you out of your screen or you're scrolling through, but also particularly with a print magazine, it gives this break from all of that's online. And there's something different, I think, that happens when you sit down and you read or you flip through something and you're consuming it at your own pace and you dip in, you dip out as it feels right for you. Because I think also when you're especially newly diagnosed, you're receiving information from all over the place and it's so much and you have to digest it in these little bits. And so I think that's the really nice thing about it being a magazine, is that people can come and go and take what they need when they need it, put it on the shelf, and then it's there when they're like, oh yeah, what was that thing that I read? And now it's a relevant thing again. They can go back to it. So when I first started, to your first part of your question, a lot of people said to me, like, magazines are dead, print's dead, like, what are you doing? And I didn't start off in print. I did start off more as a blog, and it evolved into print as I saw that people were wanting it and needing it to be in different formats. So now I offer it in digital or print, acknowledging that people consume their media in different ways. But people are always telling me how much they love that the magazine can fit in their purse. It goes with them when they're going to their appointment or wherever they're going, and they can just read it at leisure, when they don't want to be online anymore.
I noticed that the dimensions of the magazine is interesting. That's obviously that's really brilliant, actually, to make it. It's a teeny magazine.
Right. It's a half. It's 8x11 folded in half. So yeah, it fits really well into someone's bag, or like I said, there's a lot of images in there that maybe I don't know, depending on your family, you wouldn't necessarily want your kid flipping through or finding. So it's also easy to just kind of tuck it away and keep
You're
it for
talking
yourself.
to two guys who through their entire family life have had plastic surgery journals floating around the house.
Right.
So I remember finding my 3-year-old daughter sitting in the living room, flipping through my plastic surgery journal one morning. Had a lot of explaining to do.
Yeah, I don't like to read magazines, or to be honest, even books on digital media. I like to have the physical, copy in my hand. I like to be able to fold it back and
it's not just because we're old. My kids are the same way. They won't actually. They do not want to read digital media. They want it printed, actually.
Yeah, well, I think it feels different. You're holding it, you can smell it, you're seeing it in this different way. But I know for myself with magazines, I don't necessarily read them from front to back. I like to flip from the back to the front or the middle, or it's a very different way of consuming it.
What goes into like making a magazine? First of all, you talked about like there's 20, 30 like contributors, and how do you pick the people that you're going to feature in a particular magazine release?
Yeah, absolutely. When I first got started, I was really the one who was hunting down people and convincing them to let me publish them. Now it's gotten to the point where I receive lots and lots of submissions on different themes. So I publish it 6 times a year, and each one has a particular theme. So I always put out a call for submissions. And then the way that I'm choosing them.
What have been some of your themes lately?
Oh, yeah.
I heard you said the one that's being worked on now is body. Obviously, we're most interested in that, but obviously tell us about some of the other ones.
Yeah. So I do body every year. That's one of the annual issues. And then in October, I always do a metastatic issue as well. This year, that one has a theme of self-care. But some of the other themes have been parenting with cancer. I've done fertility and infertility issues. I've done intimacy and relationship issues, mental health and new normal type of issues. Earlier this year, we did a change makers issue, which was really fun. And that was more about different women who've had breast cancer and are now working, like myself, working in the field and trying to make it a different place for someone coming up next. Coming up later in this year, I'm going to do Bay Area young survivors, and that'll be my first kind of focusing on a particular region. So lots of different themes, all related to survivorship in different ways. But then, so I get all these submissions coming in, and I've never wanted someone not to submit their story because they don't think of themselves as a writer. So part of what I do is encourage people to write their stories. I think there's a lot of healing to come from that, whether you have ever written anything or this is kind of you're feeling called to write. So I don't pick the stories based on someone, being a really, really good writer. I pick them more on trying to tell as many different types of stories as possible with each issue. I want someone flipping through it to find themselves in it. So I make sure that I have women in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. I make sure I have all different types of breast cancer. For the body issue, I wanted all different types of reconstruction, not reconstruction. With the hair thing, I wanted people who were comfortable going just bald or people who weren't comfortable with that. It's many different experiences. And then also, while most of my contributors are from the United States, I do have contributors from all over the world. So trying to also hit those demographics as well.
And just, like any business person we ever wanted to know, we have our own practice. We always, we're doctors and businessmen. How do you pay for this? Is it, do you have advertisers? Is it from subscribership or?
Yeah. So primarily it's from subscribers. And
how many subscribers do you have?
So at this point, I have around 500 subscribers of the physical magazine, and then more, who are subscribed to my newsletter as well. But this year I started opening it up to some really light advertising from those women that I was explaining who have businesses who had breast cancer themselves and are now having breast cancer businesses. So I've been accepting some money from them to do an underwriter position, and then I share their business with my readers as well. But for the most part, it's the subscribers who pay for it.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing. You mentioned, and when you're talking about the body issue, from the reconstructions, again, my ears perk up.
Yeah.
Something we do a lot of, and we've become very involved with, is the no reconstruction piece.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually like to even think of it more of as, instead of no reconstruction, we'd like to think of it actually as an active form of reconstruction, which is a flat closure, because it's an extremely interesting area, growing area. And what are your thoughts and experience with that?
So personally, I am the recipient of a flat closure that I'm very happy with. I didn't even realize that some women were having trouble getting the results they wanted, because I guess I got really lucky from the get-go that I had a surgeon who heard me and knew what I wanted. At that point, I was really interested in minimizing surgeries, had a 3-year-old at home. I wanted to get back to her as quickly as possible. Also had hoped to have another child. So that's why I went with the unilateral, because I was hoping to maybe breastfeed another child at some point. That didn't end up being in my story, but happy with the result and happy to be where I'm at. But since then, I have met other women who have either gone, flat from the start or gone flat after other types of reconstruction. And just learning about the need for more visibility of people choosing flat closure so that other women know that it's an option, or they know how to ask for it, or they know. I think you don't really have any options if you don't know what your options are. So that's always been a big thing for me, is just to expose women to what all their options are in this whole entire breast cancer thing. But flat closure has been a huge thing that needs visibility. And I've been very proud to be a part of helping to spread that.
That's great.
I always like to ask patients, particularly people like you that interact with a lot of patients on a regular basis, what are things that we as doctors should know? Sometimes patients they're not as candid with us as they are with each other. So what are things that you've picked up that, you want people like us to know and our friends and colleagues to know?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I was just talking this morning via Instagram with a woman who has decided to go flat and said that her conversation with her surgeon didn't go the way she expected it to, because she ended up spending about an hour convincing him that she was making a choice, an informed choice about what she wanted. And she said that, he kept saying to her, I'm not arguing with you, but then, it kept going back to that. So, and I hear that from a lot of women, not just with flat per se, but conversations with doctors where they end up feeling like they need to fight, maybe not necessarily like strongly, but it's this feeling of having to defend something that is wanted. So I think you guys are in an interesting position of educating, but also listening. And that's what I think I hear mostly from women, is that they want to feel that they're in a partnership and that they're educated and that they know what they want from their body, or they know what they would feel good about in their body. And so many times during a breast cancer experience, your body kind of feels like it's this medical thing that belongs to everyone else except yourself. And so I think if you guys are able to give back some of that ownership or some of that trust and say, I get that you own this body and this is you that has to live within this thing, and I just want to make it and help you make it what feels the most like home to you. I think that would be the biggest message.
That's good advice.
I think women just want to feel trusted. We grow up with this. It's an interesting thing. We grow up with this feeling that we have lots of respect for doctors, and when this terrible, terrible diagnosis comes along, you want to know that someone can guide you to wellness again. But along the way, I think you want to feel like you're in a partnership and not just that your body belongs to someone else.
Yeah, I think getting that type of a message out is so important for patients to to know that, and we also as doctors, I think we want it to be a conversation. And I think there's this, on both sides, a desire for it to be a conversation that doesn't always turn into a conversation. And
Sure.
I think just letting people know that, we as physicians do want to have that conversation, and we do want to make
Yeah.
it kind of a partnership.
Well, you're coming into women's lives at such an interesting time when they might be feeling really betrayed by their bodies. And women have these really complex relationships with their bodies from early. I'm seeing it with my own daughter now at 11. And, I had hoped that she would feel less than or receive all these messages that women get from society or whatever. So you develop as a woman this relationship that's a little bit at odds with your body. And I think you spend your teens, your 20s, your 30s, your 40s trying to figure out how to love that body. And then this breast cancer diagnosis comes along. And I know for myself, I felt totally betrayed and everything was flipped on its head. Like, what? Now you're going to, try to kill me from the inside out? Like, what is happening? And it's so hard to then learn again to love that body again, especially when you then have to remove body parts. Things look differently after, radiation and even just all the other parts of treatment, things are different. Even tiny, my eyebrows aren't the same after treatment. Like everything has changed. And so it's just a very layered onion, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I've got two daughters, a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old. So I feel like I'm getting a rapid education.
The full onion.
Those.
Yes, it's complex.
Talking about eyebrows, my 16-year-old said that she didn't care if everybody in the house gets coronavirus, and she needs to get her eyebrows done.
Priorities. So I've got a question. So you get people contributing from like all over the country and the world, right?
Yeah.
And you hear their stories and what they're writing in. Do you see a difference, in terms of different parts of the country, or do you see any trends or differences in the stories based on just geography?
Oh, that's interesting. I think the differences are more between like city and rural, maybe.
Yeah.
I think the women who are fortunate enough to be living in cities when they're diagnosed have more of a chance of meeting someone else like them or seeing others who are like them and maybe being connected to more resources. So the women who are living more rurally might be the only person that they know, or they're traveling many, many, many miles to get to their doctor. And it would just be too hard to also travel all those miles for support groups or, whatever support services. So I would say that's the biggest difference. In terms of other countries, I sometimes see that women have a harder time within their own families with more stigma and things like that, as far as like a breast cancer diagnosis or maybe the sexualization of breasts and then how that overlaps with a medical diagnosis and things like that.
Fascinating. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I've always kind of wondered is, moving forward, we've seen so many changes already, and we'll continue to see changes in the way breast cancer is diagnosed and treated. And we had a great discussion with Lindsay Byrne, who's a genetic counselor, and we're seeing and hearing more about previvors.
Mm.
How does Providership play a role in your magazine and your audience?
Yeah. So I've always wanted to be primarily a breast cancer magazine. And so I haven't had a lot of previvor stories that didn't ultimately translate into a breast cancer story. However, last year I did a genetics issue where half of the issue were women who had been diagnosed with breast cancer who also had some genetic predisposition or family history. And then the other half of the magazine were women who had not been diagnosed with breast cancer, but had been diagnosed with BRCA or something like that, or maybe had watched it come through their family. I do occasionally, actually in the body issue, the woman who's going to be on the cover is a previvor. So I do see so many intersections between what the previvor community is going through, particularly when it comes to breast surgery and, all of the issues and feelings that come up with that. But I think there is so much to learn from that community in terms of watching mothers, grandmothers, sisters, and, this whole family legacy of breast cancer that is so painful in all of these families. There's so much to be learned from that. For those of us like myself, here I am, the beginning of maybe what will be a thread that runs through my daughter's life and into her children, and et cetera. So I think there's a lot to be learned about how to have those conversations, how to talk about, people's choices in terms of preventative surgeries and things like that.
Fascinating.
Well, this has been amazing, April. Thank you so much for talking to us. Let our audience know, where can they find you? How can they find Wildfire?
Yeah. So primarily, or the best place to start is on my website. It's wildfirecommunity.org. But then I'm also on Instagram. That's wildfire_BC_magazine. And then also on Facebook, which is Wildfire Community.
And we'll always try to put those links on the description of our podcast. And they'll find this on Spotify. It's on iTunes. It's on our YouTube channel. And so, it's been really enlightening talking to you. I'm fascinated. It's great. It's great to see.
I think you gained a new subscriber with our practice.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I think we're going to definitely we'll sign up and keep a copy of your magazine in our waiting room so our patients can get some exposure to it. So
yeah,
we'll follow up with that. But again, thanks for the time and good luck with this. It's an amazing effort, and I think it's a fantastic thing. So thank you.
Thank you, and
happy Mother's Day.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for listening.
We hope you found this episode helpful.
Want more info? Connect with us at mwbreast.com.
And go behind the scenes with us on Instagram at mwbreast. Thanks for tuning in.
And join us next week.